I have pretty much always known that I don't want children. I mean, I went through a brief phase in my life where I kind of expected that to change because I felt that it wasn't normal. Well, people made me feel like it wasn't normal to not want to have children. So I kind of thought that I might change my mind in my mid-20s. I'm currently 32 and I still haven't changed my mind. So in today's video, I want to go through some of the reasons why people may not want to have children. And I've considered all of these reasons. I have thought about them long and hard throughout my life. And at certain points in my life, I even subscribed to some of them. But the real reason that I don't want to have children is, well, a little bit less noble than some of these big reasons I'm about to go through with you. The real reason I don't want to have children is perhaps a little bit selfish. I don't know. Let's do this. I love making these videos about my choice to not have children because it's something that I really try and urge myself to come back to every single year, just to kind of reevaluate whether I'm still there, whether something has changed. Not that I'm hoping for it to change, not at all. It's just that I really want to be honest with myself and clear in my mind as to what it is that I want to do with this one wild and precious life. If you relate to any of the things that I'm about to go through, if you subscribe to any of them, I would love, love, love to hear from you. So make sure you leave a comment. All right, let's start with the big Freudian reason. Some people may choose not to have children because they might feel like they won't make very good parents. And that could be for a number of different reasons. It could be because their parents didn't give them a great example, or they come from a troubled family, or it could be because they just don't have space or time in their lives to make for a child. That's definitely a reason that I thought long and hard about because, I mean, I have a great family, don't get me wrong. I mean, my parents are divorced, but so are the parents of probably half of today's children. So it's not really such a big deal. And I have pretty good relationships with everybody in my family. There was a period of time when I felt like I wouldn't be a good mom, but I think after doing some inner work, I've come to realize that I would actually make a pretty great mom. Yes, I think I would make a pretty great mom. I mean, Vilk, my dog, has shown me just how committed I can be to another being, and he's just a dog, right? So I do believe that I would make a really great mom, and I feel like the people that ask themselves this question, like, would I make a good parent? How can I make a good parent? That's already such a massive, big deal. That's such a huge step towards actually being a really good parent, is that kind of introspective work that you do. So that's not something that plays a huge role in my decision making. Another big reason why people may choose not to have children is because of financial circumstances. So raising a child costs a lot of money, depending on where you are in the world. But children no longer contribute money and kind of working hands to the household in the way that they did maybe, 80 or 100 plus years ago. Quite the contrary, today it costs money to raise a child, and it could be anywhere up to probably $500,000 per child in the United States if you choose to take them through, private schooling and give them that best life that you feel that they deserve. Which, of course, many parents, if they have the opportunity to do that for their child, of course they would. But not everybody can afford it. It costs so much money to even buy a house or even rent a house, to rent that space, to feed several mouths within a household, to get a nanny to come in whenever you can't take care of your child. So I feel like, especially in today's world when, costs are skyrocketing, just simple costs of living, it makes a lot of sense for people not to want to have children, simply feeling like they can't give their child that really good life that would give them a sort of competitive edge or a great head start in life. For me personally, that is probably a small reason why I wouldn't want to have a child. But I also have the advantage of being European, which means that most schooling and even college is free or very, very, very cheap. And I think the costs of living in general and the costs of raising a child are less in Europe. So while this is like a tiny part of the reason, the financial kind of aspect of raising a child isn't really at all the main reason, because I know that if I really wanted to have a child, I would make that financial space to give them a really, really great life. So there's also a movement of people who choose not to have children for environmental reasons. As we know, our planet is going through a pretty catastrophic environmental crisis. So there's about 8 billion of us on the planet today. And it's not so much the number 8 billion that's the problem. It's the fact that 8 billion of us are already living or are aspiring to live a life of relative wealth. And a life of relative wealth where, we build houses, we drive big cars, where we eat a lot of meat, where we consume and consume and consume. That's the bigger problem. So there's a growing movement of people who choose not to have children because they don't want to compound that problem. They don't want to bring more people into an already, dying world. And I can 100% see this. And I think for many years, that was probably the reason why I didn't want to have a child, was because I felt like I already live a life of relative luxury in the sense that I have a big car, I drive a big car, I have things, right? I consume things. I try to reduce my consumption as much as possible, but I still do. Just by the sheer fact of being alive and existing in this world, I consume things. And I felt that my single biggest contribution to the environment could be simply not procreating. And I think that's still a small part of the reason why I don't have children. But if I'm completely honest, I feel like if I really had a powerful maternal urge to give birth to a baby and raise a child, I would find other ways to hopefully offset that, that contribution, that negative contribution to the environment. And then we get into this really interesting philosophical territory. So the kind of anti-natalist movement, which is just a fascinating movement in itself, part of that is all about a very profound reason why we shouldn't bring children into the world. And now I don't think I subscribe to this very much, but I can see how it works. I can see how someone might think about it in that way. So the philosophical argument is that life is composed of mostly suffering. Right? I mean, this is very nihilistic. So if life is composed of mostly suffering, why would we bring another human being into this world knowing that they will also suffer most of their lives, knowing that they will suffer and then eventually die? I know this sounds super dark, and I don't necessarily think that life is comprised mostly of suffering. I mean, of course, it depends on where you live, what country and passport you were born into, what circumstances you were born into, what your life looks like in the grand lottery of life. But it's a very interesting reason to kind of consider, just as a theoretical thing, not wanting to bring a child into this world to save them from the suffering that the world will bring onto them. We should also acknowledge the fact that some people simply can't have children for various biological, health, or physical reasons. And I think that's a kind of tricky one. I actually don't know if I can have children because I've never wanted them, so I've never checked whether I can or cannot have kids. But I think for the people who can't have children, but really want to, that's a very different kind of tricky situation. I think that's where sometimes the term child-free versus childless will kind of come in the way that we normally talk about not having kids. And I think the people who actively choose not to have children would probably choose to call themselves child-free, denoting something a little bit more positive, right? It's like you are free from that choice of having kids. Whereas people who may not be able to have kids, I've more frequently heard them talk about their circumstances as being childless. And this is perhaps denoting something of a loss where they wanted to have something, but they couldn't get it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. If one of you can't have children or couldn't have children. And if any of this terminology strikes you, I would love, love, love to hear from you and learn more about that. Okay, we're finally getting closer and closer to the reason why I personally decided not to have children and why I continue not to want to have children. But before I get into like the real nitty-gritty, meaty reason, I want to talk about the maternal instinct. So I think a lot of people also choose not to have children because they feel like they are missing the parental or the maternal or the paternal instinct, any of the three. Maybe they don't like children. Maybe they don't like small babies. Maybe they just never wanted, they just never felt that like visceral urge to have babies and to procreate. There's so many ways in which like a lack of maternal or paternal instinct can manifest itself. And I gotta say that I've never really felt a maternal instinct ever. Now, there is an argument which says that the maternal instinct is actually a myth, that it doesn't exist as a physiological phenomenon, and that it's actually more of a social phenomenon. So the way that it would work is that we see women of our age, of our circumstances, you know, our friends, our family, people around us at a certain age having children. And it kind of does happen like now, you know, for me, I'm 32 and 3 of my friends had babies in the last year. So this is where it's all starting to happen, you know? And that social pressure, like seeing them have babies, makes you think, oh, maybe this is a time for me. So I think the argument goes today that the maternal instinct is that kind of social pressure rather than an actual physiological phenomenon. Speaking for myself, I have never really felt that maternal instinct at all, whether that's a real thing or not. And I've also never felt particularly drawn to babies or children or spending much time with them. My brothers were born when I was a teenager, so I was 14 and 16 when they were born. So I got to spend quite a bit of time around little babies and toddlers. And yeah, I think that was kind of enough for me. You know what I mean? But let's talk about the real reason, the real honest reason why I just don't think I will ever have children. The honest reason why I believe that I will never have children and why I don't want to have children is because I don't want to take on the role of a mother. That is a role that I believe is completely underestimated by much of society and the systems that we live in. Being a mother is a huge, lifelong, emotional, practical, financial commitment, if you do it right, of course. It is quite possibly the only job in the world that is truly a 24/7 job that you have to commit to for the rest of your life, and that much of society and much of our economy does not see as a job. Of course, it's also a calling. Of course, it's also a lifestyle. It is so many things packaged into one. And because of how huge it is, you know, how huge being a mother is, I just don't think it would ever fit into how I see my life. Okay, so I know this doesn't really compare, but when I first got my dog, I spent like 2 or 3 months in a state that I would describe as I lost myself. I felt like I lost a part of my identity because I was so engrossed in taking care of Viok and, you know, raising him and researching all the kind of food that he should be eating and training methods and this and that and like all the things. And I just felt like I had completely lost a part of myself in that process. Now, don't get me wrong. I am now here with a dog that's 1.5 years and he's great. And I have definitely regained that sense of self since. And I know it doesn't really compare because a dog is like this compared to like a child, which is like this. But that's the whole point. if I had those feelings of like extreme commitment, extreme protectiveness, like I losing myself in making sure that I do what's best for him and he's just a dog, that made me realize that being a mother would be that times a million, and I would absolutely throw myself into the project, into the task. But I would have to give up a lot of other things in order to do that. And I simply don't want to, because the way that I see my life is that I want to be doing things other than being a mother. I've never wanted to be a mother. I don't have that feeling like I would. So why would I force myself into that role if it's not something I want? Whereas I do want, deeply, deeply, profoundly want to do a lot of the other things that I'm currently doing or planning to do in the future. I simply don't see myself taking on the role of a mother. And I think that's probably it. And it's not a very noble reason, I don't think. Maybe some people might see it as a selfish reason not to want to have children. But you know what? That's fine. I don't really mind, because we only get one life. I just know that my life's energy is much better spent on things that I am genuinely passionate about and things that I really want to contribute to this world, which I simply wouldn't be able to focus on for many years if I were to become a mother. Just knowing myself, my perfectionist, OCD, obsessive self. I may not be passionate about bringing a child into this world, but I am passionate about creating positive change. I am passionate about the arts, about filmmaking, about writing and literature, about incredible projects that I've lined up for the future that will hopefully make a difference in people's lives. Those are the things I really want to commit my life and my life's energy to, And I just know, because I know myself, I know that if I were to become a mom, those things wouldn't happen for a very long time. And I think it's really important to think through these big life choices, right? And choose the thing that feels right to us. Now, do I feel like I'll ever regret not having children? I honestly don't think so, because how can you regret something that you've never wanted in the first place? And in the vision that I have for my own life, part of that will involve building communities and being around people that matter, whether they're family or friends. So that's the real reason I don't want to have children. It's because I love my life the way that it is, and I honestly don't think that there is space in it for a little baby. Well, those are my reasons. If you have chosen not to have children, I would love to hear from you. Which of these reasons do you relate to the most? And are there any that I have accidentally missed out on? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the comments section.